This is WCN, the Whole Care Network. You talk, we listen. Content presented on the following podcast is for information purposes only. Views and opinions expressed during this podcast are solely those of the individuals involved and do not necessarily represent views of the Whole Care Network. Always consult your physician for medical and fitness advice, and always consult your attorney for legal advice. And thank you for listening to the Whole Care Network.
Have you ever met anybody that has caregiving on their bucket list of things to do in life?
Beyond caregiving, how do we care?
We also have to care for ourselves.
How do we treat friends, family, strangers we meet?
Forget it.
How do we heal? The physical, social, financial, spiritual.
Hello.
By creating healing ties. Tying it all together like a bow tie. With your host, Christopher McClellan, the bow tie guy.
Well, greetings, everyone. It is the bow tie guy, Christopher McClellan, for another episode of Healing Ties 2.0 featured on the Whole Care Network. And as you know, on the Whole Care Network, we are all about story sharing and resources because we believe it's through story sharing where diversity meets the road to collaborate on a common cause. And our common cause is supporting caregivers before, during, and after caregiving ends. And as you know, we're celebrating National Family Caregivers Month with the reboot of the popular Healing Ties podcast. Well, I think it's popular, but other people have told me that too, with our 30 podcasts in 30 days to celebrate National Family Caregivers Month and the soft launch of our new Whole Care Network website. So when you get a chance, please visit our new website at wholecarenetwork.com. Well, you actually got to go to the old site to get to the new site, but you'll see the link. And then when you get to the new site, you'll see a friendly character by the name of Bo, because Bo ties things together on the Whole Care Network. When you see Bo, I know you're going to get it. And during our soft launch, we're asking our listeners to provide us with feedback on the new site so we can continue to build the site for you to easily find your favorite podcasts, favorite blogs, and videos. Oh, and by the way, you'll be able to search content on the Whole Care Network via our 4 pillars of care: our physical, social, financial, and spiritual health. All 4 of those categories will be searchable either by one or all 4, where you can find all the content you're looking for on the Whole Care Network. And my final plug is to be sure to look out for our new YouTube channel featuring live shows, our streaming 24/7 radio station, and a few other exciting changes coming to the Whole Care Network in 2021. Well, enough from me. My guest on this episode of Healing Ties is my good friend, Dr. Elliot Sklar. Dr. Sklar is an associate professor in the Department of Health Sciences at Nova Southeastern University. He presently teaches a wide range of courses in health science and supports caregivers through innovative programs that he leads for the Wellmed Charitable Foundation. And Elliot, it's great to have you on Healing Ties. Thanks for joining me today.
Thank you so much. I'm honored to be participating with you today.
Well, you know, this is kind of like old hat stories for us because we've probably done 6 or 8 of these podcasts, but the tides are turned just a little bit. I'm interviewing you instead of you interviewing me.
It's nice to be in a different seat.
And we've had such a delightful time, and we're missing our friend Lucy today, but we'll have Lucy on another program. But while I know a lot about your background and skills and talents, please let our listeners know about what you do at Nova and Wellmed. And we'll get into our discussion about something we're very passionate about, LGBT caregiving.
Absolutely. So I've been working in the sphere of public health and social services for almost 20 years now. And I have a PhD in public health. And during the course of the time when I was working on my studies, HIV was a very big issue in the LGBTQ community. And a large number of the research projects and initiatives that I was getting involved with touched this community specifically. So during that experience, I worked very closely with a lot of community members who were aging, who were providing care. And I became very much attuned to the disparities and the isolation and a lot of the challenges that people were going through. And though things have shifted and HIV is certainly no longer what it used to be in terms of our healthcare environment, a lot of the same issues are still present in a variety of communities. And that's really at the heart of what it is that I do. I have worked in programming and program evaluation. I teach classes on epidemiology and disease outbreak and disaster preparedness, but also on health behavior. And I mentor a lot of PhD students in the research that they take on, hopefully making our world a better place.
And I hope you have some free time with all your busy schedule. That's quite that's quite a resume. But I do know that you're very happy in what you do.
I love what I do. I think that the ability to hopefully impact the lives of others, it makes a profound impact upon my life. And that's what we're here for.
Yeah. And, in a lot of our previous discussions, and I know this is a topic that we're both very passionate about, LGBT caregivers and what are the differences for LGBT caregivers? There are some subtle differences. We all just want to care for the one that we love or we care for. But what in your thoughts and as you've talked to people across the country, what are some of the concerns that LGBT seniors have as it relates to aging and caregiving?
There is still a great concern over acceptance, prejudice in the healthcare environment, isolation that exists. And I think that is a result of two things. I think that within the LGBTQ community, there is ageism and don't regard the aging process in a positive light as we should. But I also think that we live in an environment in which up until 5 years ago, we did not have the right to marry. And that federal protection changes the landscape for caregivers tremendously. But even with that, there are a number of states that still have discriminatory healthcare laws and practices. In fact, there is a website called beyondido.org.
Yes.
Lines state by state what those differences are. So for some caregivers, those differences are legal, financial, structural. And for a lot of other caregivers, it's much more emotional, community connectedness, and that feeling of isolation that I think is very universal to caregivers, no matter what walk of life they are coming from.
And that's the unique feature is the right word about caregivers. There's so many similarities as it relates to isolation, ageism. But I think one thing that gets lost in the conversation, especially as it relates to LGBT seniors and their caregivers, is the system that they grew out of when they were younger. Things were much different in the 40s and 50s for gay men and women who were growing up in that era. Today, the gay youth see things a little bit different. And sometimes that's a little hard to grasp that what is going on now didn't really happen back then.
You are absolutely, absolutely right. And I think that things continue to evolve in the right direction. But the theme that I saw in the people that I worked with a number of years ago and through this very present day is internalized homonegativity and internal homophobia.
Right.
That's very counterproductive to our health, our well-being, and our sense of making those healing ties within our community and within ourselves.
Oh, very, very well said. And relate a conversation that I had with somebody. Well, I'm 63. I think this person was in his early 30s. And the relatable conversation I had with this person was, well, do you think a program like Will and Grace was on the TV when I was a teenager? And it made that person stop and think for just a moment. And the response that he came back with was quite impressive. You didn't have any role models to grow up with when you were young. And I said, well, that's exactly right. And that's how, when you look at our gay senior population today, there was very limited role models to grow up with.
110%. And within the context of coupling and aging and caregiving, that is a story not often told in our media as it relates to LGBTQ couples. And that is one of the reasons why we have been allies and partners in helping to educate and illuminate this issue for others, I think, because these stories need to be told and people need to hear them.
It is the stories we share that helps people understand, because especially as it relates to caregivers, no matter what your orientation, what culture you're from, your economic status, caregiving is indiscriminate. And when caregivers have the ability to share their story, they learn three valuable components. They receive validation, they find resources, and they get a little bit of respite. And they understand that really people just aren't that much different from each other.
That is absolutely true. I think men sometimes have a more difficult time of expressing their feelings because we are socialized not to. And it makes that experience of isolation all the worse because we don't have a sounding board or people that we feel comfortable sharing with. And that really needs to change and evolve.
You know, the kind of the funny part of that, Elliot, is men, whether you're a gay man or a straight man, that rule applies. Men are notorious for not being able to feel comfortable enough to share their story. When you do, there's two things that happen when you share your story. Not only do you feel better, you're helping the person who's receiving the story is feeling a lot better also. Goodness.
Yes. And if you look at our landscape nationally, there are very, very few centers for men's health, men's health research that are university-based. I think there are only a handful. And that did not even exist a few years ago. So we have long thought there has been an inherent bias in our healthcare system toward men in a positive way. But in fact, that isn't necessarily the case. And one of those disparities that we see is mental health among men because of that very issue that we're not socialized to talk about how we're feeling.
Do you get the sense, though, at least I maybe feel this way, that's changing just a little bit? What's your thoughts on that?
It's changing a lot, and I'm happy to see it. And in the programs that I help to facilitate for the Wellmed Charitable Foundation, they're all telephone-based, anonymous caregiver support sessions through the caregiver teleconnection. And what has been such a unique experience for me is that since my involvement with the teleconnection about almost 15 years ago, 10 to 15 years ago, we've had a very good number of male participants in all of the sessions, no matter the topic, and a lot of repeat participants. And what we're finding through feedback that we receive and through the participation in voices is that, as you've said, the experience is more similar than it is not. And it's refreshing for people who participate to be able to hear those same concerns.
When you can put yourself in somebody else's shoes just a little bit, while everybody's stories is different, there is some comfort that comes from that because you recognize that you're really not alone, and that helps break down those isolation barriers.
It really does. And I think among LGBTQ caregivers, something that we don't really recognize is that we become caregivers at a higher rate than our LGBTQ counterparts. And, among the majority of unpaid family caregivers, typically that person is caring for a spouse, a parent, a sibling. So these are not really any different, but in a sense, because we have not historically had conventional families with children, it is expected that we fulfill that role. And that creates a unique burden. So that is, I think, one of the unique nuances that LGBTQ caregivers don't necessarily recognize, is that they have much more in common because we are providing care at a higher rate.
Right. And then when you think about today's LGBT seniors and the era that they grew up in, being involved more so with family of choice rather than family of origin, the community's always been good at kind of taking care of itself per se, but taking that next step to feel comfortable in reaching out for help from systems that have often denied us the help is still challenging.
It is. And that is, I think, one of the other characteristics of the caregiver teleconnection sessions that I appreciate, is that we have a large number of health professionals who participate, and they represent social service organizations from across the country. And these are professionals who are looking for more resources for their patients and connections for their communities. So I think that the tides are really changing, not only within the community, but the healthcare community as well.
Well, and you are a big part of, you and Lucy are a big part of fostering the change with the work that you're doing. And I know I've participated in a number of the calls with the Wellmed Foundation, and it's always engaging. And I'm just so happy to hear the people when they call in and just tell a little bit about their story, because you get the sense right from their voice that there's some relief there.
Yes, absolutely. And I know how the connection that you've had with participants in our sessions have impacted them profoundly. And they've written to Wellmed and provided gleaming feedback on the experiences that they've had. So that is the impetus, I think, of what we do and what keeps us going.
And I'm confident that not only we're going to do more with the Wellmed, that we'll do more sessions with you and Lucy here on the Whole Care Network as well. Both of you have a standing invitation to be on the network at any time. So
we would be delighted.
Yeah. So Elliot, I think this is a great time for us to take our break. And, as I doing with all my guests on our 30 and 30 podcast, I'm kind of put you on the spot. I want to know a fun fact about you that I don't know, and our listeners will want to know. So you got to put your thinking cap on.
All right.
Okay. Okay. So you're listening to Healing Ties on the Whole Care Network. We'll be right back.
Tomorrow on Healing Ties 2.0.
What I'm hoping we're going to talk about today is something that is much closer to my heart, which also happens to be part of my day job. And that's the education and awareness around family caregiving, the dilemma, the incredible balancing act of family caregivers. There's over 40 million of them in the workforce who every day get up and try and provide for their loved ones and try and provide by putting food on the table, by going to work every day. Hi, it's Larry Nisenson with Genworth. Please join me and Christopher on Healing Ties and hear us talk about the caregiving crisis, how that impacts employers and employees, and what does COVID have to do with that.
Join us tomorrow and every day in November for 30 shows in 30 days. Healing Ties 2.0. Available at thewholecarenetwork.com/Healing Ties and wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts.
Well, welcome back, everybody. I am continuing my wonderful conversation with Dr. Elliot Sklar from Nova Southeastern University. And Elliot, it's that time. I'm putting you on the spot. I want to know, one fun fact about you that I may not know, and I know that our listeners are going to want to know?
Tough question. I think the fun fact is that I am the very proud pet parent of a almost 15-year-old dachshund or dachshund, depending on where you're from, whose name is Mr. Burt Reynolds. And it's the apple of my eye and the light of my life.
I did not know that fun fact. So you have a 15-year-old dachshund. So are you implying that north of the border, the breed is called different than what it would be south of the border?
Yes, and even different regions of the U.S. here pronounced very differently. I've become a very active community member in the dachshund or dachshund community here in South Florida. There's an annual, it's called Wiener Fest.
The Wiener Fest, yes.
Yes. So I've long been participating in that and supporting the local rescue group. 1 in 4 of these dogs develops a disc disease that can cause them to become disabled. And Mr. Burt Reynolds is one of those 1 in 4. And puppy, he became unable to walk and to relieve himself and go to the bathroom. And so we truly learned a different spectrum of what it means to be a caregiver. But
very
it
much so.
Was a very rewarding experience. Unfortunately, he's walking and jumping and doing great in his senior years. So I have learned a tremendous amount about relationships and patience and compassion and friendship, not only from my dog, but from the dog community.
Well, that is a delightful fun fact for you to share. That's terrific. So goodness, full speed ahead with caring and sharing on all sectors. So goodness. So Elliot, we just have a couple of minutes left in the Healing Ties today. I'm confident we're going to do more of these, but please let our listeners know how they can reach out to you, learn more about the work that you do at Nova and with Wellmed.
Sure. Certainly, I'm easily found online. If you look me up, Elliot Sklar, on Nova Southeastern University's website, my profile page will come up. And the Wellmed Charitable Foundation has a caregiver website that has a lot of information about the caregiver teleconnection and sessions that Lucy and I help to co-facilitate.
Well, Elliot, with the stories you share and the work that you do, you are certainly someone who's creating healing ties all around us. I can't thank you enough for joining me today, but most importantly, I can't thank you enough for your friendship.
Likewise, thank you so much.
Well, goodness, that does it for this delightful episode of Healing Ties. As you know, I'm your host, Christopher McClellan. You might know me as the Bowtie Guy. I've created a life to love after caregiving ends by sharing stories, resources, and being with awesome people like Dr. Elliot Sklar. Healing Ties is a part of the Whole Care Network and produced in the plush studios of Oddbox Productions in St. Louis, Missouri. Check out the soft launch of our new Whole Care Network website and be sure to meet Bo and subscribe to Healing Ties wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. We'll see you for another episode of Healing Ties, well, tomorrow as we continue our 30 podcast in 30 days to celebrate National Family Caregivers Month. Thanks for listening. Take care. Bye for now.
Ciao.
This is WCN, the Whole Care Network. You talk, we listen.